Can you describe a forest, what's behind it, especially in terms of as a progression from other work you've done, thinking about, say, the hive and blossom, and how you see this piece in relation to that?
Yeah, so forest to me, it's a really interesting and new development to my practice. Primarily, my work over the last 30 years has been building sculpture or working with sound or paintings, drawings, and so even though I've used technology a lot in my work, which informs the sculptures. Say, for example, the hive has a live data feed from a real beehive, which. But the reason for using technology is really the interesting thing for me is how it can kind of connect people to themselves and to the environment. And so it's the way of using technology in a quiet, but powerful and an emotional way. And what I think kind of intrigued me about working on this idea for forests. So when you and I first started talking, Joe, it was a way about how can a conversation about the environment between sort of people be not only documented as a point in time, but how could it be seen to be evolved? Because everything moves, everything is fluid, nothing is static, and it seemed to me there could be a real opportunity to do something exciting, which is always moving, always sort of fluid, and always responsive. You'll all be aware now of how trees actually kind of talk to each other, through the roots, through the mycelium, how they'll evolve, how saplings will evolve on the forest floor, how they always leave enough light to kind of come into the forest floor. So kind of left to their own devices, a forest and a wood is like a perfect ecosystem. When we're not around, it's kind of perfect. It's when we are around, we kind of get in the way and kind of mess things up really. And so it's kind of seeing that as I don't know, as an example, as an exemplar, and as a metaphor, maybe about how our relationship with the planet and in terms of ourselves. And one of the interesting things I think we've been talking about is this idea about conversations and about we all have conversations about the environment, what we can do, what we can't do, what would be useful to do, what wouldn't be useful to do. But in a way, these things can kind of get lost. They can kind of get lost in the ether, and somehow you can write these things down. How much is actually kind of read, how much is kind of forgot. But it seemed interesting to us that somehow if you could kind of document this ever evolving conversation between people and organisations about their response to the environment, and express this in a sculptural work, developing all these kind of parameters within these sort of conversations. So within the tree itself, you have its height, you have the scale of the canopy, you have the tree rings, you have the fruit, you have the mycelium, you have the leaves, you have all these different elements within one tree, and each one of these things can be evolved like parametrically. And so I thought it'd be interesting is if these elements which can kind of grow are actually linked to conversations. So the tree itself becomes a physical virtual manifestation of a conversation between people or between organisations. So it becomes almost at that point in time, it becomes something which is kind of solidified. It becomes a representation of that conversation. But it could also evolve as and when that conversation evolves itself. So it's not fluid. And then we thought that an interesting thing about having this individual tree that I think that's one of the kind of real challenges and the problems with where we are now generally as a society, that we're in these kind of individual kind of silos. And if actually these trees talk to each other, as maybe it would be helpful if we did, very much how trees talk to each other with kind of mycelium. That could be a really powerful and interesting way. So this tree then becomes a little orchard, and it becomes bigger until it becomes like a forest, and it grows and it grows and it grows. And so you can start seeing these. Each one of these trees is completely unique, beautiful in its own way, but there's a connection between each of them. And the idea that you could kind of go into this world of thoughts and words expressed visually as a forest, sort of thing. And I think especially if the participants in this artwork feel that they're invested in it in terms of their words, their story is actually expressed in the forest. It's not something then they just look at. They think, well, this forest exists because of my words, because of my thoughts, and also this idea that it's not static, it's always evolving. You kind of go back and you can maybe sort of see how these ideas, these thoughts would actually influence another tree and another tree and another tree. And it's through this, I think, through this sort of sense of kind of communication that that potentially we can see, solutions to, the greatest existential challenges that we're currently facing, and I believe that there are ways to solve this kind of crisis, but it is through, I don't know, changing our mindset, changing how we communicate, and also maybe expressing how we feel, maybe even changing how we kind of feel. And I think that's one of the maybe the kind of great things about art in general, is that not only can it refocus on how one sees and perceives the world, but how one feels about the world and oneself. And I think if you can feel differently about something, you're possibly more likely to change your actions. And even if you change your way of doing things even by 3-5%, in 2 years, 3 years time, that 5 degrees, you're over there, you're not over here. So it's these kind of small incremental changes, which might seem small at the moment, can make big changes, in the future. And I think it's this idea that we're not alone. We're I think one of the kind of sort of phrases we've been talking about is like, we're not apart from each other. We are a part of this thing together. We're part of the world. We're part of nature. Nature isn't us. We're not this kind of superior being that has all the answers. Far from it. In so many ways, we're the problem. So I think it's a case of kind of sort of stepping back a bit, kind of looking at where the answers are, maybe having a little bit of kind of humility, and just feeling again. I think, and hopefully in a small way, this project can help contribute to that.
I love that, because it's so in keeping with what Ego to Eco is all about, which is one, the biomimicry and learning from nature, and two, I like this idea that we don't necessarily need to see as human. I loved it when you came up with the concept of a part, not a part. It just really summed up exactly what we're trying to do. And then that idea that you're not alone, that this is something, a place where a community can grow, is the ultimate aim of Ego to Eco, is to create this community of people that can step toward the future together, and take action.